Alright, this is just going to be a short video on Mills on Liberty. In the past, I've seen there's been some misunderstandings, and especially when it comes to having crazy teachers with very unpopular views, and when you read Mills on Liberty in a place like New Mexico or Texas or the South, and I'm speaking, of course, of guns and gun control. Why does our society make us misunderstand these readings? Anyway, so let's start with a big general preface, and I'm going to read different little passages and then try to make sure they're clear just because of those misunderstandings. So first, a key clarification before reading this is to understand that this is the same J.S. Mill that wrote about utilitarianism. So watch him frame this. So in the middle of page 2, let me read this passage. It is proper to state that I forego any advantage which could be derived to my argument from the idea of abstract right, as a thing independent of utility. I regard utility as the ultimate appeal on all ethical questions, but it must be utility in the largest sense, grounded on the permanent interest of man as a progressive being. So now, first, notice, he is not speaking about right in what he calls the abstract sense, like, this is just a law of nature, you have a right to do all of these things, whether they give anybody any benefit at all. No, he is saying the test and the reason for these rights is because of the benefit of society, benefit of the individual, but remember in utilitarianism, we count everyone equally. So my interest does not outweigh the interest of anyone else, and so we're always trying to produce the most happiness possible we can in the world. Not just for most people, but the most happiness we can create. All right, so that is the preface. Everything lies under that test. The idea of rights, whether it's free speech or life, is because of benefit. All right, so now let me continue reading where I left off. Those interests, I contend, authorize the subjection of individual spontaneity to external control only in respect to those actions of each which concern the interest of other people. Fancy words, he is saying. You can spontaneously use your freedom, express yourself, whatever, but you are subject to making sure you are not harming others. It is for the collective benefit, right? So we understand. Already, you read the harm principle, you understand that from page 1, and you understand that we can limit freedom when it comes to harming other people. Okay. If anyone does an act hurtful to others, there is a prima facie case for punishing him by law, or where legal penalties are not safely applicable by general disapprobation. There are also many positive acts for the benefit of others which he may rightfully be compelled to perform, such as to give evidence in a court of justice, to bear his fair share in the common defense, or in any other joint work necessary to the interest of the society of which he enjoys the protection. Pause there for a second. So notice, we have a reason there for paying taxes. If your taxes are used for the common defense of which you enjoy the protection, then you have to pay your fair share. Okay, now keep going. And to perform certain acts of individual beneficence, such as saving a fellow creature's life, or interposing to protect the defenseless against ill usage, things which, whenever it is obviously a man's duty to do, he may rightfully be made responsible to society for not doing. Notice. So right there, Mill is going to say, for example, the libertarians, say Narvison idea that I don't have to save anyone's life unless I cause them to be in harm. No, he's saying, nope, rights can require this. You are responsible for society for not doing such things. Now let me add one little extra piece to this. Because right now, reading this and reading the harm principle on page 1 that I think is clear, you would get the sense that I can do whatever I want with myself as long as I don't harm other people, right? For instance, a suicide sort of case. You could say, well, this means as long as I don't hurt anybody, I can just kill myself or mutilate myself. I can pull out all my teeth, wear them as a necklace. This is going to be a new body mod that I'm going to make popular. I'm not going to do it, right? We'll call it jeffing. You pull out your teeth, wear them as a necklace to show how radically expressive you are. Anyway, so can I do these things? Can I hurt myself? Now notice, go to page 5. Page 5, roughly the middle of the page. Let me read. The distinction here pointed out between the part of a person's life which concerns only himself and that which concerns others, many persons will refuse to admit. How, it may be asked, can any part of the conduct of a member of society be a matter of indifference to the other members? No person is an entirely isolated being. Now pause there. I hope some of you have heard of the John Donne poem, right? No man is an island. Brilliant. I mean, this is very much the type of rhetoric. It is impossible for a person to do anything seriously or permanently hurtful to himself without mischief reaching at least to his near connections, and often far beyond them. If he injures his property, he does harm to those who directly or indirectly derive support from it, and usually diminishes by a greater or less amount the general resources of the community. If he deteriorates his bodily or mental faculties, he not only brings evil upon all who depend on him for any portion of their happiness, but disqualifies himself for rendering the service which he owes to his fellow creatures generally, perhaps becomes a burden on their affection or benevolence. So notice, he's saying, no, you can't just hurt yourself because this also affects others. We are not completely isolated individuals. And yes, for those of you who, and this is something my dad used to say, nobody helped me, so I shouldn't have to help anybody else. That's such a lie, right? How did you get to work? On roads that we collectively paid for, right? How did your workers get educated? Through schools that we collectively paid for. The electric grid that you use cost us all, right? So now we are ready to connect this to, I am sorry for how dear this is to you, ideas of gun control. Now, if we look at some basic stats, putting these two passages together, we would say, does everybody in the society gain happiness by the 25, actually less than 25% of you who own guns? Does that benefit everyone collectively? No. Now, do you gain happiness from the ownership of your gun? Sure. You're feeling a little more secure in defending your house or something. Those of you who love hunting, sure. Those give you happiness, that ownership of that gun. But does that ownership overcome the benefits or harms that it produces to the rest of society when we think of a society like the United States, who is far and away, 20 times more, right, likely to have harms from other people's guns than most other societies in the world. Now, we can also argue this point of its effects on other things besides just me feeling afraid that I'm going to get shot when I'm teaching my classes. Me feeling like I'm just going to get shot when I walk through the world. When we see how incredibly high gun violence is in a society like the United States. No, think of the other effects this has. Am I free to practice free speech when I think everybody around me might be armed? Think of being in a classroom and I have a weapon on me while I'm teaching. Or I'm just walking through my daily life. I'm in a bookstore and I'm clearly armed. Does this affect your personal security? Yes. I'm sorry, gun owners. We don't feel more safe when we know you are carrying a gun. We feel less safe. Seriously. Does this also affect things like free speech? Sure. If I'm afraid that the person I'm talking to is armed, I'm going to be less free to share my opinions because I don't know what threats are going to come from that. And by the way, does your having a gun on you affect the way you present yourself? Absolutely. You will be more aggressive, right? Study this stuff. Anyway. Now, when we add the passage on page 5 to this idea that do your rights stop just at yourself? Do you have to worry about how your harming yourself affects others? Yes, because now look at gun stats more broadly. Let's add to that stat that the majority of people don't own guns, and the majority of us do not feel safer or benefit from your owning a gun, no matter what you might think. Now add another stat. Who is killed by guns? If you have a gun and that gun kills someone, the statistically most likely person it killed is yourself. Suicide is the most common death caused by guns in civilians, and police, military as well. But I mean, in the ordinary possession of guns, the right to bear arms, not just for a militia, but for an ordinary citizen. If your gun shoots someone, you shot yourself. Most likely on purpose, but then also there's a big stat there of you accidentally killed yourself with your gun. Second most likely person that was killed by your gun, innocent bystander, accidentally shot in some way. Most likely your kids get your gun and shoot people, things like this, or school shootings. I know it's a small percentage of deaths, but that's significant. These are completely innocent people killed by your gun. The very tiniest stat is bad guys killed by civilian gun ownership. Sorry, that is a very tiny percentage compared to the other two categories. Innocent people, innocent bystanders, or you killing yourself. So what does this say? Put these passages together, and Mill would say, yes, gun control makes sense if we're seeking rights that benefit others and don't harm others or harm yourself. Now, we could make this very rational for anyone. Does my right to do what I want, to express myself and to be happy, include my right to, say, play around with biotoxins? Can I just play around in my house with things like, botulism toxin or the Black Plague? It makes me really happy to tinker in my chemistry set and play around with the bubonic plague. No, these things need to be controlled because of their likelihood of causing harm to others. Even though I don't mean to cause harm to anyone, I could make a mistake. I could accidentally let some of my little chemistry experiments out. And so we very much as a society, for general benefit, should control my ability to make biotoxins in my basement. Fine. All right. Now let's read farther, because there's a couple other passages here that I think we could use some help with. Go to the bottom of page 3. And let me read a fairly lengthy passage and skip a little bit. And this talks about free speech and how much free speech you have. Okay? And how it should work. Why we should put up with Jeff. Not even put up with Jeff, but probably send him baked goods for the service he does by offending everyone. All right, here we go. If all mankind minus one, so everybody except Jeff, were of one opinion, and only one person were of the contrary opinion, mankind would be no more justified in silencing that one person than he, if he had the power, and boy, I wish I had this power, would be justified in silencing mankind. Okay, so notice. Even if it's just one person that's this crazy socialist anarchist that thinks every child deserves health care, right? Even if only one person thought that, we shouldn't silence that person. Continue. But the peculiar evil of silencing the expression of opinion is that it is robbing the human race. Posterity as well as the existing generation. Those who dissent from the opinion still more than those who hold it. Notice. If we silence an unpopular view, the harm is not to me, it's to the majority who disagree with me. Listen, if the opinion is right, they are deprived of the opportunity of exchanging error for truth. So what if I'm right? Right? Then you are missing out on learning that you are wrong in your opinions. All right, but let's say that's rare. If I'm wrong, they lose what is almost as great a benefit, the clearer perception and livelier impression of truth produced by its collision with error. To refuse a hearing to an opinion because they are sure that it is false is to assume that their certainty is the same thing as absolute certainty. You would have to guarantee that you are never wrong. You know that's false. You know you've been wrong about many things in your life. I've been wrong once or twice before. If the cultivation of the understanding consists in one thing more than in another, it is surely in learning the grounds of one's own opinions. Skip 5 lines. He who knows only his own side of the case knows little of that. His reasons may be good, and no one may have been able to refute them. But if he is equally unable to refute the reasons on the opposite side, if he does not so much as know what they are, he has no ground for preferring either opinion. So we desperately need crazy people giving dissenting opinions, not only because they might be right and show that the popular opinion is wrong, but you must be able to defend your view against unpopular views, or you should have no confidence in your opinions. Now, one more little passage. This is the top of page 4. An opinion that corn dealers are starvers of the poor. I mean, that's a nice little view. I mean, it's a good article to read about these things. An opinion that corn dealers are starvers of the poor, or that private property is robbery. Oh, read Proudhon's article on what is property. Oh, so cool. But now notice, these opinions, they ought to be unmolested when simply circulated through the press. Again, free speech. If you have these very harsh opinions, you're with Proudhon, you're very angry about private property, you absolutely have a right to these opinions. Now, of course, a right to free speech is a negative right, meaning you cannot silence me, but I can't make you listen to me. Again, I know I've used this metaphor before. I very much have the right to take weird nude photos of myself, but I can't make you watch them. I can't put it up on a billboard downtown because you can't avoid seeing my nakedness. All right, fine. Good. Okay, so now go back. Now, these ought to be unmolested when simply circulated to the press, but may justly incur punishment when delivered orally to an excited mob assembled before the house of a corn dealer, or when handed about among the same mob in the form of a placard. Acts of whatever kind which, without justifiable cause, do harm to others may be, and in the more important cases absolutely required to be, controlled by the unfavorable sentiments, and when needful by the active interference of mankind. The liberty of the individual must be thus far limited. He must not make himself a nuisance to other people. Notice, your opinions may absolutely be expressed, but not in a context where they're going to cause harm. Now, when we read, for example, here, use a very standard case. Can I shout bomb and terrorist in the middle of a plane flight? No, this is going to cause harm. I'm allowed to say these things, but not when they're going to be a nuisance to society. Now, what he's saying is, first, in an ordinary case, these need to be rebutted. These need to be shown to be false. But sometimes, when the harms are direct, they need to be interfered with. For example, no offense, but insurrection on January 6th, right? These acts, these speeches are the normal sort of violent rhetoric we use. I mean, when we're talking about sports or politics, we talk about killing people and so forth. But when you're saying these things in front of January 6th, an angry mob, you notice this might cause them to become a nuisance to others and harm other people. So when you notice this, you have to stop them. I'm so sorry, but I'm so angry. Trump, you needed to stand up and say, no, I didn't mean for you to physically attack people. You misunderstood. And these sorts of speeches can be silenced if it's clear they're going to pose a nuisance. So now, when you read the study by Shapiro that says certain media outlets, in the Shapiro study, Fox News, is likely to give people the wrong opinion, promulgate an opinion that is actually factually false, and this is going to lead to the deaths of hundreds of thousands of human beings, then I am sorry, but you need regulation. You are the equivalent of shouting fire in a movie theater, and especially when these opinions are false. Now, notice, should we control or limit false opinions? No, absolutely not. The idea of spreading a false opinion is it is your duty as a citizen to show people that it's false. But when that opinion, false or true, leads to absolute nuisance and harm to others, then I'm sorry, your freedom of speech is curtailed in that context. I mean, no matter how well-founded and factually supported my view of, say, all children should have health care is, if I say those opinions in front of an angry mob in front of a hospital, I am causing nuisance, no matter how well-meaning my speech is. If that is likely to lead to absolute harms, then, like fire in a movie theater or bomb on a plane, that is not included in my right to free speech, and you can silence me in those cases. And I should absolutely be punished for inciting that violence or inciting that nuisance. I am liable for that. All right, I hope that was quick.